quite the most extraordinary 48 hours. Yesterday, we had minister after minister resigning, with Boris Johnson saying he was going to stay in power for as long as he could. And then at 17 minutes past 9 this morning, he bowed to the inevitable after losing more ministers before breakfast. And he said that he would be resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. We've had a statement from the American President, Joe Biden, which basically doesn't even mention Boris Johnson by name, just saying they're looking forward to working with the next prime minister in order to complete world security and fight with Ukraine against Putin. However, over here, we've got people queuing up now, runners and riders, to try and take the place of Boris Johnson, who intends to stay on in power until autumn. It's just been revealed that one of the reasons might be is because he's booked a wedding celebration for himself and his wife, Carrie Simons, in Chequers, which is the grace and favour residence which prime ministers can use whilst they're in office. And people are saying, well, one of the reasons he doesn't want to go is because he's got this wedding celebration booked. And there are people on the Labour Party side, who are the main opposition here in the United Kingdom, saying that Boris Johnson ought to go. And if he doesn't go immediately and appoint a deputy, they will call a vote of no confidence. So it's been an incredibly turbulent 2 days here in Westminster. And it looks like there's going to be a lot more to come. Will he stay or will he go until a formal successor is appointed in the autumn?
All right. Sounds like a song. Nick Wallace, thank you very much. To discuss Boris Johnson's resignation further and what this means for U.S. politics, joined now by former advisor to Presidents Clinton and Trump and Newsmax analyst Dick Morris. Dick, how do you read what's going on here?
Well, you know, I know a lot about Boris Johnson because I was a consultant for Brexit, and that was the movement that he really was involved in. The important thing to realize is that when a politician gets stability from his agenda gives him power and stability and backing. And when he lacks an agenda, he loses control over events. It's like someone riding a bicycle. When you drive quickly, you have good balance. But when you're just more or less standing still, it's very hard to balance. And after Johnson succeeded in his mission, which was to get Brexit approved, get it passed, and get it enshrined in British law, which was an enormous accomplishment for which he deserves incredible credit. And then after none of the bad things everyone predicted would happen as a result of Brexit materialized, Johnson didn't have another agenda. He had nothing else to do. He had nothing else to say. There's no theme to the last many years of his prime ministership after Britain after Britain left the EU and established the Brexit policy. So he became vulnerable to opportunistic infections. He's like someone with a compromised immune system. His agenda is his immune system in politics. Yeah. And without that, you catch colds, you get all kinds of stuff. And the scandals that brought him down are petty. That he had a COVID ban and he divided himself with the party, that he appointed a guy who had been involved in sex scandals, and he didn't stop the appointment. Minor stuff that shouldn't bring him down, but that because he had no theme to his prime ministership, to his incumbency, he had already accomplished the theme. He was so vulnerable to outside infections.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did want to play this clip from Boris Johnson. He was accused of trivializing that issue that you're talking about. As you said, it was kind of minor, but let's listen to what he said.
Did you say pincher by name, pincher by nature?
I'm not going to get into some trivializing discussion of what I may or may not have said. This is a serious matter.
Yes.
The member is now being I believe he's had a complaint made against him, and that is where I propose to leave it.
No, but the point is,
the members had a complaint made against him.
If you just let me for a moment, the point is that the allegation is that you have trivialized this issue.
Did he trivialize it? Or is it like what you said, Dick? It's like you add all these things up. If you don't have an agenda with a lot of following behind you, these things matter.
It's hard to trivialize trivia, but there was no reason to oust him. There was no big issue of policy. It was simply that he lost control over events. The amazing thing about Trump is that because his agenda was so aggressive and so strongly pursued, he always controlled events. Even when they impeached him, he controlled the events and controlled the dialogue. And Boris Johnson just ran out of things to say, ran out of things to do in the second part of his term.
What kind of, before we go, Dick, what kind of general support is there amongst the populace in the UK? Because Donald Trump, regardless of the strength or weakness within his party, there are tens of millions of voters out there that said, we support you. Is there anything like that supported Boris Johnson?
Yeah, there was, and to some extent there is, but the problem is the issue passed. Imagine that everything Donald Trump wanted took place, that the borders were closed and crime was reduced and all of the issues that we talk about, inflation was solved. Right. There wouldn't be that big a constituency for Trump because it's the unmet needs that are generating it. Boris Johnson is the victim of his own success.
Interesting.
Like Rudy Giuliani, he solved crime problem in New York, and then nobody said crime was a problem, and he lost his following and his popularity.
Yeah, very good. Dick Morris, thank you so much.
Thank you.